Today we're going to explore the unexplainable, delving into horror stories that defy logic and leave anyone with goosebumps. The unknown always attracts us, makes us question what really exists beyond what we can see. Imagine staying in a seemingly ordinary hotel but where strange things happen. Doors that lock by themselves, whispers in the middle of the night, shadows that move without explanation. Could it be imagination or something really haunted? Get ready for disturbing reports from guests and employees who have had experiences that they could never explain. Would you dare to spend the night in a place like this? Turn off the lights, adjust the volume, and let's enter the unknown. It was a rainy night when Miguel arrived at the hotel. He was exhausted after a long trip and just wanted a place to rest. The building, with its ancient facade and Gothic details, looked like something out of a horror novel. The windows were fogged up from the night's humidity, and a mist crept across the stone floor. As soon as he entered the reception area, he noticed a strange smell, something between old wood and a faint floral scent like wilted roses. The receptionist, an elderly man with sunken eyes and a neutral expression, handed him the key without saying anything other than, "Room 207. The elevator is not working." Miguel picked up his suitcase and climbed the creaky stairs. Each step echoed through the empty hallways. When he reached his room, he noticed that the doorknob was strangely cold. He turned the key and pushed the door, which opened with a long creak. The room was simple: a double bed, a dark wooden wardrobe, and an oval mirror hanging on the wall. But something was wrong. The air was cold even with the window closed. A faint whisper seemed to echo through the room, but Miguel ignored it, attributing it to the wind. He took a quick shower and lay down, pulling the covers over himself to keep warm. Before turning off the light, he noticed something strange in the mirror. A shadow seemed to move in the reflection. Startled, he looked around, but the room was empty. Trying to convince himself that it was just his tired mind playing tricks on him, he turned off the light and closed his eyes. A few minutes later, a disturbing sound woke him up. It was the creaking of a chair in the corner of the room. His heart raced. He looked toward the chair, and there in the darkness seemed to be something, or someone. The next morning, Miguel went down to breakfast and tried to ignore what had happened the night before. But when he struck up a conversation with other guests, he discovered that he was not the only one having strange experiences at the hotel. A couple staying in the room next door reported hearing knocking on the wall all night. An older man said that, as he walked down the hallway on the third floor, he saw a woman in a white dress standing near the window, but when he blinked, she was gone. The most disturbing story came from a hotel employee. She approached Miguel as he was about to leave and in a low tone asked, "Did you see anything in your room?" Miguel hesitated. I think so. But maybe it was just my imagination." She shook her head. "It wasn't your imagination. Something is in that room." Many guests complain about whispers, shadows, and the mirror. It's like something is watching them all the time. Intrigued, Miguel decided to investigate. In a local library, he found old documents about the hotel. He discovered that, more than 70 years ago, a woman named Helena had lived there when the building was still a boarding house. She was pregnant and waiting for her husband to return from the war. But he never did. Desperate, Helena locked herself in room 207 and never came out. She was found weeks later, already dead, holding a letter that was never sent. Since then, many guests have reported seeing her silhouette in the mirror, hearing crying and feeling the presence of something inexplicable. That night, Miguel decided to face his fear and return to the hotel. He wanted to see with his own eyes what was happening. With his cell phone in hand, he began filming. This time, there was no wind to blame for the whispers. The mirror, motionless, seemed to pulse with a dark energy. Suddenly, the temperature dropped dramatically, and Miguel saw, clearly, the silhouette of a woman reflected in the glass. But when he turned around, there was no one there. His instincts screamed for him to run away, but something held him there. That was when he heard a cold whisper behind him. "He never came back. Why would you come back?" The shock was so great that Miguel ran out of the room, leaving his things behind. He never went back to get his belongings. Room 207 is still there. And many say that if you look in the mirror long enough, you will see Helena, waiting. It wasn't just the rooms that held mysteries at the hotel. The restaurant, an elegant room decorated with antique chandeliers and mahogany furniture, also had its share of unexplained stories. Guests and staff spoke of strange events occurring after dark. One night, a group of tourists were dining at one of the tables near the large fireplace when suddenly, all the silverware began to vibrate by itself. The metallic sound echoed throughout the room, leaving the customers terrified. Then the lights flickered, and for a moment, a dark figure was glimpsed crossing the room. When the power returned to normal, one of the chairs was lying on the floor as if someone had left in a hurry. This was just one of many reports. Waiters reported hearing whispered voices when no one was in the room, and plates were found moved without explanation. On one occasion, a waitress swore she saw a woman dressed in white sitting alone at a table in the back of the room. But when she approached to serve her, the woman simply disappeared before her eyes. The restaurant has always maintained its refined atmosphere, but those who paid attention would notice unsettling details. The large mirror on the wall opposite the fireplace sometimes reflected shadows that did not belong to anyone present in the room. A chef who had worked there for over 20 years said that one night, when he closed the kitchen, he heard the sound of dishes being stacked and footsteps shuffling in the dining room. Thinking that a colleague was still there, he went back to check but found the place empty. It was completely silent, except for the chill that had settled in the air. Another guest reported that, while dining alone, he felt a chill run down his spine. Looking around, he noticed that all the candles in the restaurant had gone out simultaneously. The waiter ran to relight them but found the matchbox wet, with no explanation. The occurrences in the restaurant defied any logical explanation. Even investigations by experts in paranormal phenomena were unable to clarify the events. Equipment recorded sudden changes in temperature and recordings captured incomprehensible whispers. Guests who tried to record videos in the restaurant to document the anomalies often found their devices turned off or with corrupted files. A group of paranormal investigators who spent the night there recorded a nebulous figure appearing in one of the chairs, only to disappear seconds later. Most disturbing was the account of a man who, while dining alone, felt a cold hand touch his shoulder. He turned quickly but the room was empty. Witnesses said his face immediately turned pale, and he ran out without finishing his meal. The most famous story about the hotel restaurant involves the recurring apparition of a woman in a white dress. Witnesses claim that she appears sitting alone at a table near the window, looking out as if she were waiting for someone. Some guests, not realizing that she was an apparition, tried to talk to her but were ignored. As soon as they looked away, she disappeared without a trace. A waitress reported that, while cleaning tables late one night, she saw the woman in white sitting in the same place as always. Thinking she was a guest, she asked if she wanted anything. The woman raised her head, revealing a pale, expressionless face. Within seconds, her body dissipated until she disappeared completely. The employee fainted from fright and had to be carried by her colleagues. It is believed that this woman is a spirit linked to the tragic history of the hotel. Some say that she was a former resident who lost the love of her life and since then has wandered the dining room, waiting in vain for someone who will never arrive. The stories continue to this day. Many people avoid dining alone in a restaurant, fearing that they will feel the invisible presence that seems to be stalking everyone. And those who do take the risk often leave the place before finishing their meal, because they feel that they are not really alone. It was a small town in the countryside, surrounded by mountains and dense forests. Everything seemed normal at first glance, but the locals spoke of inexplicable events that occurred at night. Lucas, an investigative journalist, heard about these stories and decided to spend a week in the city to understand what was really going on. His first night was peaceful, but on the second, something strange happened. He woke up at exactly 3:33 a.m., with a ringing in his ears and a feeling of disorientation. The window in his room, which he was sure he had closed, was wide open, and the air was thick, charged with an oppressive energy. The next day he spoke to the locals and discovered that this phenomenon was common. People reported seeing shadows moving without a source of light and hearing whispers in unknown languages. Some, when looking at their own reflections in the mirror in the middle of the night, saw different versions of themselves. Some older, others with expressions they did not recognize. On the third night, Lucas decided to stay awake to document any strange events. Armed with his camera and audio recorder, he positioned himself near the open window. At 3:33 a.m., the air seemed to distort and a low-pitched rumbling filled the room. The lamplight flickered, and for a brief moment, he saw his own shadow move independently as if trying to break free. When he reviewed the recordings, the audio picked up a whisper, "You're only seeing part of it." The video footage was static, but there was a silhouette in the background, something he hadn't noticed at the time. Lucas began to notice small changes in the reality around him. Street signs had different names from the day before, and residents claimed that certain buildings had always been there, although he was certain they were new. More disturbing was an encounter with an elderly man who told him about the midnight gap, a point in time where reality overlapped with another layer invisible to the human eye. If you're awake at the wrong time and in the wrong place, you could cross over without realizing it, the man said. Lucas tried to test this. On the sixth night, he walked through the city at 3:33 a.m., and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The silence was absolute. When he looked up at the sky, he saw stars he'd never seen before, and a double moon shone on the horizon. Then a dull thud sounded behind him. Turning around, he saw a motionless silhouette, faceless, just a dark void where eyes should have been. He blinked and everything went back to normal. But when he checked his watch, it read 4:44. He had lost over an hour of his life without explanation. The events made Lucas question everything he knew about reality. If his perception could be so easily fooled, what else could be hidden beneath the surface of the visible world? Scholars of the occult argue that our reality is just one layer of many. Some people, whether by accident or sensitivity, are able to glimpse these other dimensions. Some cultures speak of the rifts, moments where time and space overlap, allowing visions of parallel realities. Lucas realized that if the human mind only perceives a fraction of reality, perhaps there are forces beyond our comprehension that interact with us without our realizing it. His accounts led to the creation of an online forum where people from different parts of the world shared similar experiences. Many reported seeing faceless figures, hearing voices on recordings, and feeling subtle changes in their surroundings, as if they were in a place that was not exactly the same as the day before. If reality is malleable, what defines what is real? Lucas never found a definitive answer, but one thing was certain. After that week in the city, he never saw the world the same way again. In the fall of 1998, a group of 4 friends decided to stay at a remote hotel in a mountainous area. The place looked run down, with long, poorly lit hallways and a musty smell permeating the room. At the reception, an elderly man handed over the room keys and mumbled something unintelligible before disappearing into the back. One of the friends, Lucas, felt a shiver when he noticed that the room numbers had been scratched off the doors. However, they ignored the strange signs and went to their respective rooms. On the first night, around 3 a.m., noises coming from the hallway woke Fernanda up. They were slow, heavy footsteps. When she looked through the peephole, she saw only a long, empty hallway. But the sounds continued, getting closer and closer to her door. Lucas, who was in another room, also woke up, but for a different reason. He smelled an intense burning smell. When he opened his eyes, he saw dark smoke coming from under the closet door. When he opened it, he found the interior intact, but the smell lingered. Screams came from Tiago's room. Everyone rushed in and found him shaking, unable to speak. He was pointing at the wall. The wallpaper, once flowery and faded, was completely burned in one section, forming the silhouette of a human figure. The next morning, they decided to leave the hotel immediately, but found the reception empty. No sign of the attendant. When they went to their car, they realized that their keys were missing. With no choice, they went back inside, but the hotel was different. The hallways seemed narrower, and natural light did not penetrate through the windows. It was then that they noticed something that took their breath away. The portraits on the walls, previously with old images of unknown guests, now showed themselves. Each of the friends was featured in one of the photos, but with blank expressions and completely black eyes. The friends tried to remain calm, but each minute inside the hotel seemed like an eternity. Lucas noticed that the temperature had dropped drastically. His own breath was visible in the air. The silence became deafening. Fernanda noticed something even more disturbing. The carpet in the hallway was wet, as if someone had just gotten out of a shower. But there was no sign of water leaking anywhere. Sensing a presence, she turned and saw a dark shadow at the end of the hallway. The figure was static, faceless, but seemed to be watching them. When they tried to go down to the reception, they realized that the stairs kept repeating themselves endlessly. No matter how far they went down, they ended up back on the same floor. That was when the screams started. They were mixed voices, male and female, in desperate laments. The friends tried to leave the hotel, but the main door was locked. The key that Tiago had mysteriously disappeared from his pocket. The phone at the reception was dead. They decided to look for another way out. Lucas found a door in the basement, but when he opened it, he found himself face to face with a long corridor that shouldn't be there. The group hesitated, but decided to go ahead. The floor was covered in dust, and fresh footprints were leading ahead, as if someone had recently passed by there. At the back, a door creaked slightly. They approached it and pushed it. Inside the room there was a gigantic mirror. The reflection showed the group, but something was wrong. Fernanda had no eyes in the reflection. She stepped back, terrified, and felt a cold touch on her shoulder. When she looked back, there was nothing there. The mirror, however, now showed a pale woman with a grotesque smile, standing behind them. Lucas grabbed a piece of wood and broke the mirror. The sound that echoed was that of human screams. The room shook and the walls seemed to close in around them. They ran back down the hallway and suddenly they were in the reception again. The hotel was empty, but something had changed. The front door was ajar. They ran outside and found the car with the keys on the front seat. When they looked back, the hotel was no longer there. In its place, there was only an empty lot. After that night, the friends avoided talking about what had happened. But something continued to haunt each of them. Fernanda began to hear whispers when she was alone at home. Lucas saw figures in the bathroom mirror. Tiago constantly dreamed about the hotel, but they were still trapped there. What happened that night never had a rational explanation. A year later, Lucas tried to research the hotel's history. He discovered that, on the same site, there was a building that had caught fire in 1942, killing all of its guests. A picture of one of the guests, rescued from old archives, showed a man identical to the receptionist who had served them that night. That was the last time either of them spoke about it. The haunted hotel. On a cold winter night, a man named Marcos arrived at an old, isolated hotel surrounded by a dense forest. The place was reputed to be one of the most haunted in the region, but out of tiredness and lack of options, he decided to stay there. From the moment he entered, he felt a strange presence, a heavy air that seemed to make it difficult to breathe. When he received the key to room 306, the receptionist avoided eye contact and only whispered, "Good night and good luck." On the first night, Marcos began to hear whispers coming from the bathroom. He checked but found nothing. The mirror, however, was fogged up as if someone had just taken a hot shower. During the early hours of the morning, he woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. When he opened the door, he saw a man standing at the end of the hallway with his back turned. When he called out, the figure turned his face just enough to reveal a black, empty eye. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared. Every corner of the hotel seemed to hide dark secrets. The hallways stretched longer than they first appeared, and the mirrors reflected distorted images. The lobby smelled strange, a mixture of old wood and something else, something rotten. The carpet, though new, hid dark stains that resembled dried blood. At the hotel restaurant, Marcos ordered a simple dish, but when the waiter brought the food, something was wrong. The meat was raw, almost bleeding. He complained, but the waiter just smiled and said, "Here, everything is served the way the former guests liked it." Suddenly, the other customers stood up at the same time and looked at him in silence, their faces pale and empty of expression. As he investigated the hotel's history, Marcos discovered that the place had once been a psychiatric hospital where patients were subjected to cruel experiments. Many died mysteriously, and reports of hauntings dated back to that time. One night, he decided to record the sounds of the room while he slept. When he played the recording, he realized that a voice whispered his name repeatedly, getting closer and closer. Terrified, he looked around and saw a shadow coming out of the mirror. Just as he tried to run, he felt something grab his ankle. He fell and hit his head, blacking out instantly. Marcos woke up in the reception area with no memory of how he got there. The receptionist handed him the room key again, saying, "Welcome to the hotel, Mr. Marcos. Are you ready for your stay?" Everything had started again. Every guest who passed through the hotel reported different sensations. Some heard voices, others saw shadows crossing the walls. Marcos realized that reality inside the hotel did not follow the normal rules of time and space. Objects changed places when he looked away, doors that he had closed opened by themselves. On his last night, a mirror showed him something that couldn't possibly exist. Himself, standing with his eyes completely black. His image smiled and whispered, "You've always been here." Marcos fled the hotel, but when he looked back, he saw that the building was no longer there. Only a dense forest occupied the space. His car was intact as if he had never left there. But his mind carried scars from something that shouldn't exist. It was a cold winter night when Eduardo, a 42-year-old businessman, arrived at the hotel. Located in a historic city in the interior, the establishment was known for its imposing architecture and, for those who were more attentive, for its rumors of unexplained events. Eduardo was not a superstitious man. Always skeptical, he dismissed ghost stories as mere inventions of impressionable people. His goal there was simple: to rest for an important meeting the next day. As he entered the hotel, he felt a sudden cold that did not match the temperature of the reception. The walls decorated with old paintings seemed to be watching him, but he ignored this impression. The receptionist gave him the key to room 308. In the hallway leading to the room, he smelled a strange smell, something like dried flowers mixed with something metallic. When he opened the door, the light flickered slightly before stabilizing. During the early morning, Eduardo woke up to a noise. It was a faint whisper, almost a lament. He thought it might be a guest in the hallway, but when he got up, he realized it was coming from inside his own room. The bathroom mirror was foggy, as if someone had recently taken a shower. The water in the faucet was dripping, although he was sure he had turned it off before going to sleep. The feeling of being watched grew. When he turned to the mirror, he saw for a brief second a silhouette at the back of the room. A shiver ran down his spine. He turned around quickly, but there was no one there. The worst moment came when the bed shook slightly. The walls seemed to pulse as if they were breathing. The air became heavier, and the metallic smell returned, stronger than before. Eduardo left the room in a hurry, going down to the reception. The receptionist just looked at him with a tired expression and murmured, "You're in 308, aren't you?" He just nodded, feeling his blood run cold. The employee sighed and shook his head as if this were a common occurrence. The hotel records showed that many guests had reported similar events in room 308. In 1985, a woman claimed to have felt invisible hands squeezing her wrists. In 1994, a man ran down the hallway in a panic after seeing his reflection smiling at him in the mirror, even though he himself had his mouth closed. The cleaning staff avoided that room, claiming to hear children's laughter when they were alone. Certain objects would change places, such as chairs that would move to the center of the room during the night or light bulbs that would burn out even when they had just been changed. The most macabre story came from a former employee. According to him, decades ago, a woman named Helena had been murdered in room 308 by a jealous lover. Her body was never found, but guests claimed to see a female figure in a black dress standing at the window. Eduardo researched these reports and came across something even more frightening. No renovations made to that room lasted very long. Walls would inexplicably crack and wallpaper would peel off on its own, as if the room itself rejected any attempt at change. Experts in paranormal phenomena have visited the hotel over the years, trying to capture evidence of the unusual activities. Some audio recordings have recorded sounds similar to muffled crying and indistinct words. Temperature sensors showed sudden drops only in room 308, even though the rest of the hotel maintained a stable temperature. Skeptics argued that it could all be explained by natural phenomena, such as vibrations in the building's structure or the effect of the human mind on its own fears. However, no one could explain why the events repeated themselves only in that room. One of the most disturbing theories suggested that Helena had never left the hotel. Her spirit was trapped there, reliving her last moments over and over again. Some legends said that she was seeking help to find her body, while others claimed that she was doomed to haunt the space forever. The bravest guest who tried to spend the night there reported vivid dreams of a woman screaming in despair. Others woke up feeling a presence next to the bed, although they saw no one. On one occasion, a guest claimed that his suitcase had been opened and all his clothes were folded inside out, without anyone having entered the room. With so much evidence and frightening reports, the hotel decided for a time to close room 308. But with each new attempt to reopen it, something happened. A new light bulb would blow. The electrical system would fail only there. And occasionally, the reflection of someone who shouldn't have been there would appear in the bathroom mirror. One of the most memorable stories was told by a former employee, Ricardo, who worked the night shift. While on one of his rounds, he heard old music coming from the hotel restaurant. He thought it was strange, since it was already the middle of the night and there were no other guests in the dining room. As he approached, the music stopped abruptly. The chairs were slightly moved away from the tables as if someone had just gotten up. The smell of cigarettes permeated the air, something unusual, since smoking had been prohibited in the hotel for years. Ricardo felt a shiver when he noticed damp footprints on the floor, leading to the hallway that led to room 308. He followed them hesitantly. When he reached the door, he heard a whisper coming from inside. The sound was incomprehensible but full of anguish. On impulse, he turned the doorknob and turned on the light. The room was empty, but the mirror was fogged up again. When he got closer, he noticed that there was something written on it. Blurred and trembling, it read, "Help me." Ricardo ran out, feeling an invisible weight on his shoulders. He quit the next day, vowing never to return to the hotel. Another guest, Carolina, a history student, decided to stay at the hotel out of curiosity. She loved mysteries and wanted to challenge her own courage. During the first night, she woke up feeling something pulling at her bedsheet. She opened her eyes and saw only the darkness of the room. But when she turned to the side, she noticed an indistinct figure sitting in the armchair in the corner. Paralyzed by fear, she tried to turn on the lamp, but it didn't work. She took out her cell phone and used the flashlight to illuminate the room. The chair was empty, but a slight rocking still made the fabric move, as if someone had just gotten up. The next morning, she noticed fine scratches on her forearm, as if tiny fingernails had touched it during the night. The Hotel of Shadows remains open, but room 308 remains empty. Staff avoid spending too much time near it, and guests who ask about the rumors receive vague answers. What goes on there defies any logical explanation. But one thing is certain, there is something in that room that does not belong in this world. And those who dare enter it never leave the same.